that would for my personal farm, yeah, that would wreck me. I mean, there's that can't be a thing. That if that were to have happened in my operation, it would have been game over right there.
This is the Real Food, Real People podcast.
The number of different things that people growing food these days have to keep track of is insane. Not just all of the stuff about growing and how that part actually works, but also the logistics of keeping multiple pieces moving and having workers and equipment and schedules, so much stuff. And then on top of that, political pressure, regulatory pressures that are unclear, and people don't know what they're supposed to be doing sometimes to make sure they are doing everything just right and by the book. It's a lot for anybody to manage. And our guest this week opens up about that. He farms several different crops, which means he's got a lot of different stuff to keep track of. His name is Brady Karstetter, and he farms in the Quincy area here in Washington. Thank you for joining us for the Real Food, Real People podcast. I'm Dylan Honcoop. This is documenting my journey across the state and everywhere I can go to find the real stories of people who grow our food here. The podcast is sponsored by Mana Insurance Group, based here in Linden, Washington, where I'm from, but also they have offices in California as well as in Arizona, and they are all about planning ahead, not just picking up the pieces when things go wrong. Washington Dairy Farmers also supporting the podcast. You can check them out at wadairy.org. Make sure to see their virtual farm tour if you haven't already. That's available again at wadairy.org. We very much appreciate their support. Dairy Farmers of Washington, also Washington Red Raspberries supporting the podcast, and Williams, powering your clean energy future with a community grant supporting our podcast as well. So thanks to all of our sponsors. Now let's go to Quincy, where we talk with Brady Karstetter. So how do you describe yourself as a farmer? Like, what kind of farmer are you?
I guess that's a vast question, but, to be a farmer, it takes several hats, and I think it takes a special person to do what we're doing out here. Not just me, but everybody, I would say, that is a farmer's got similar characteristics as far as just being able to handle the day-to-day, everything getting thrown at you. I mean, you can start your day thinking one thing's going to happen and turns around. So I'm good at handling the stress and the day-to-day for sure. I mean, I've had good crops, I've had bad crops, and what you have to do is take from each year and learn from it and adapt onto the next year and progressively get better as you go on. But like many say, we got 40 seasons to get this right. So I just work every year to try to get better at it.
Explain what that means. 40 seasons to get it right.
Well, I've been farming for 8 years now on my own, small scale, kind of getting bigger as I go. But assuming that after 40 crop seasons, I'll be to the point where I hopefully can retire or maybe give it to my kids or something like that along those lines. So that's what I mean. I got 40 years of growing a crop to try to get it right and to try to pinpoint it. And it's not just one crop either, every year is different. So right. That's kind of what I mean by 40 years or 40 times.
Yeah. So you talk about crops. What are your crops? Like if you were to go to wherever, you're on vacation in Hawaii and they say, hey, oh, you're a farmer. Like, what kind of farmer are you?
Okay. So, our operation's a little different than some. Dad specializes in orchard, apples, cherries, and pears. And me and my brother, will eventually work our way into that. We help him, but my dad mainly manages that. And then my brother and I do sweet corn, field corn, cattle, hay, timothy, and then we custom bale for hay exporters, and then we do a little bit of straw where we'll go up to the dry land and buy it from the farmer behind the combine and come in there and bale it up. So a little bit of everything keeps the guys busy.
After they take the weed off, you just come in and...
Yep. They slam their header on the ground, and they, instead of spreading it, they windrow it, and then we just come in with balers, trucks, stackers, and haul it out of there and sell it to the dairies and feedlots around here. So
Need to grab that?
Nope. No.
Phones.
Yeah. Always on them.
And it's changed farming too, right?
Mm-hmm. I don't know how they did it with before phones. I mean, if I couldn't communicate with all my guys and all the quick questions, I don't know how they did it back then, but
yeah, I've thought about that too. I remember, my dad was doing custom farming when I was real little.
Okay.
So I don't remember much about it, but like, how would you line up fields and go from one to the next and letting somebody know that you need to get picked up? Cause you take a tractor from one place to the other and
yeah, no. And that's another thing too, is, just without phones, I don't know how, I really don't know how they did it, because, the hardest part I would say of my job is you can't be everywhere at once. And with a farm this diversified and a lot going on, you got to have a lot of trust in your people, and you got to have people that understand what needs to be done before it needs to be done. I mean, by that, I mean 24, 48, 72 hours out, you better be lining these guys up, making sure everything's in place. And so just having good help of people that understand, the big picture.
So it's a lot of it's about logistics, really.
100%. 100%. I mean, you better have everything set up in place the night before, or some guys in particular on my farm will just stand there. It's like, what have you been doing? I've been waiting for you. I'm like, okay. Yeah. But, that's how it goes. You get good people, you get bad people. We have great employees. And they definitely make the world go. The good ones really make the world go around.
Yeah. So talk about what crops are you working on right now? Like
corn.
What's growing right now?
We're all corn this year. Corn price is on fire. It hit 200 last night, so pretty happy about that.
200 meaning what?
$200 a ton. So it generally, I know a couple years ago it was around that 165, 170, but granted our inputs weren't quite there, as in fuel, fertilizer, and et cetera. But with corn being right there, that's awesome, and it's easy to grow. It's kind of hard to mess up corn if you put it in on time. And
well, I've seen people do it.
Yeah, I know you can mess it up, and you can mess up anything in this industry. But as far as other crops you can grow, the beans, and beans are a lot more temperamental, and some of these other cash crops, onions, spuds. I mean, those take a little more babysitting.
So corn, is that corn for human consumption, animal consumption? What kind of a product is it? Are you selling the whole plant?
Some corn. So we're growing seed, sweet, and dry. So all the dry will go for, it goes to CHS. And so whether they're going to do ethanol with it or ground it up and make some feed, it's kind of up to them. But the sweet corn, obviously, some of it will be super sweet, table corn, and then some of it will be processed corn that you'll find in your stores, cut up in a bag. Yeah, frozen. And then the seed is for Monsanto, and I'm assuming guys will be planting that somewhere in the United States. So, yeah.
So what's the process, planting corn, getting corn going out here? I mean, I planted corn. Granted, it's different corns, field corn, where they chop up the whole plant for animal feed, for dairies.
For silage.
Back on the west side. You're growing totally different kind of corn in a way.
Yep.
Talk us through the process.
Okay, so, right now, later today, we'll be planting. So I've been pre-irrigating like crazy. I'm fairly young. One of my biggest, I think, mistakes from previous years was just not enough water. I mean, you can't get enough water, and so you want that profile as full as you can get it and give that corn a good habitat. And some of our dirt here in Quincy, it's really heavy. So if you can get that corn in the ground without having to put water on it, you won't crust that dirt. And so if you crust that dirt and that seed's trying to poke up, it might hit that crust and turn. So these are, like I said, the things that you learn as you do. And
so the idea is to get the water in first, then plant into moist soil.
Yep, moist soil. You can water it up, but if I were to water these circles I'll be planting today in particular, you would have to just keep the water on. And a lot of the times I've seen it. The seed will be sitting there underneath that dirt, trying and trying and trying. And sometimes it just takes that circle to go over it, loosen up that soil, and that seed will poke out within a couple hours. And, if the sun's out, and it's crazy. But so then we're pre-irrigating right now, getting our field spread with either manure or commercial fertilizer. And then we'll be putting the seed in the ground. And then from there, you just got to watch your water and make sure that thing is happy. We got one spray in between all that for weeds. And then other than that, let it grow until harvest. For dry corn in particular, we're taking it, just the kernel, the cob, for the kernels, thrash it, and then the rest is left for the cows. So, and
then what about like sweet corn? How do you have to pick that by hand, or you have harvester that does that, or how do you do it?
So the sweet corn, we have our own combines for the dry corn. So we do that. It's a little more legwork for the farmer. Sweet corn's a decent program for the fact of they come and do the harvesting. So they have their corn pickers. They tell you when they're going to come in there. They tell you water off 48 hours before they come, and everything else is on their plate. So that's why it's kind of appetizing for my farm, because in that particular instance we're gone baling, so I don't have to worry about having trucks and combines and guys. And back
to the logistics.
Yep.
And you're thinking about what you're doing at that time of the year.
So right now, or even 2 months ago, I'm thinking, okay, what are we going to be baling? Where are we going to be at? Okay, what works? I can't grow that because I'll be robbing Peter to pay Paul. If I'm over here doing this, well, chances are I'm letting this down over here. And so you have to really look forward at your operation 6 months out. But even in this year in particular, with how the world's just a changing place every day, it seems like, the corn just jumped. It wasn't this price last year. And so I had plans on growing more sweet corn and double cropping it. So by that I mean we plant wheat in the fall, grow it up to where it's in its soft dough stage. That's when it has the most protein. It's the most valuable for the dairy. And we cut it, and then we spray it, cut it, bale it off, and then we come and strip till in sweet corn. So when I'd seen corn start to rally dry corn, I completely switched up my rotation probably 2 months ago. And so now, right today, we're spraying out all that wheat that we were going to try to double crop, and now we're just going to single crop it. So
interesting.
Yep.
A lot of factors to keep in mind.
A lot.
The water part is interesting to me, being from the west side. Right now we're still weeks, if not a month or more, for a lot of guys out from being able to plant their field corn, and they're just trying to get things dried out.
Yeah,
they had the opposite problem. The dirt needs to be dry enough to be able to plant. And it's a battle sometimes to get it in, and it's almost always a battle to get it off
in
the fall.
I can only imagine with dry corn being such a long day crop, and then you get docked so much percentage if you're not at a certain moisture. So I'm sure you guys run into that as well, because we run into that here, and we're a lot drier and a lot windier.
Well, yeah, and we don't, all of ours is field corn too, right?
Yep.
But still moisture matters as far as the dairy nutrition, so the dairies have nutritionists. They want to see a certain moisture level.
For sure.
You need that for ensiling and all that.
Yeah.
So when does dry corn come off? Because that basically, the plant has to ripen and then basically start to die and dry down.
Dry out. Yep. So right now we're planting 95 to 99 day corn. So we'll plant it now, and hopefully around the middle of October, 1st of November, we've gone all the way past Thanksgiving and harvested corn to December 1, depending on where it's at. It's kind of a question you ask yourself at the time, do I want to take this at 5, 6, 7 points higher on the moisture and then get docked that at at where we offload it?
Or gamble that you'll be able to get it off.
Or do you want to gamble the weather, which chances are you never win. Sometimes you do, but she's very unpredictable. And gamble the weather and hope you get a couple winds and no rain, and you'll get it. So, yeah.
Always a gamble. Like, how long do we wait? I could go less time and make less money, but maybe I'll make more money, but maybe I'll get screwed and not make anything.
And it really looks absolutely. And then from there, you have to look at your fields and go, what's my next year's rotation? Because maybe you're trying to get Timothy or wheat hay back in. If I wanted to take that from field corn, go wheat hay, and then back to sweet corn in the next June, well, then maybe that'll determine why I will be cutting that at 5 points higher, because I need to get in there, work it, plan it, and move on. Now, if it's just going to go back to corn, I can keep that and maybe roll the dice, because I don't have to have the corn until this time next year. You know what I'm saying? So
you must have like calendars and schedules and things
right here. But yeah, guys, it comes back to when I was younger doing this. It was when I was 21, 22. Well, I'm 25, but I've learned lots, overload of information of what I'm learning. And I just wanted to have a grasp on everything, you know. But as I'm getting older and as I'm learning this industry, it's like, you can't do everything. You can't do all this yourself. And so I have a brother and dad, their schedules are booked. And then we have our guys under us that we give responsibility to, because there's so much going on that you got to delegate it out, and you got to have good help to help you make the right decisions, get things in on time. And that's a big thing I'm learning, is investing into our people. Investing into our people is a big one.
So they can make decisions on their own.
Yep.
Be self-starters and get things done.
Exactly. You know, and so I don't care. You know, I tell the guys, I may have 90'd it and you 45'd it, but the water's still getting there, and you won't hear it from me. You know what needs to be done, get her done. And, you know, I think they respect that as well, because it kind of gives them that gratitude of, it's kind of their project. They want, you know, so, but yeah.
I think that's huge for people. People don't like to be micromanaged.
No, I hate it. But, and so, you know, me being the youngest brother, and then my dad, I kind of had to deal with it coming into the farm, and I hated it. And I was like, okay, I won't be doing this with my guys. You know, I'll give them the rope, and hopefully they don't hang themselves. But, you know, a lot of the times too is you can't teach half of this. It's learn, you know. And you know, with some of my guys, we were gluing that main line I told you before we started this, and we had a couple joints that we did wrong. We had to put some couplers in and stuff. And just the other day, we went over the bills of what that intersection cost us, because pipe's just crazy right now, expensive. And, you know, show them so that they understand, you know, because you can't just expect them to know everything. I think if you give them the big picture, I think they'll take it for what it's worth.
Yeah, like this decision has a cost that goes with it.
Exactly.
This mistake has a cost that goes with it.
Yeah, I don't think some of our guys do, but some of our guys think, oh, what? It's just a 10 by 10 by 10 tee. It's like, that's $120 right now, you know. And we've made 3 of those mistakes this week, so you know we can't be doing that, you know. Yeah.
So you talk about being the youngest in the family coming into the farm. How far back in your family does farming go?
So I'm technically second generation. So my dad bought into our first farm with my grandpa. So and then my grandpa never ran it. He was the fire chief in Spokane. So my dad came down here to Quincy when he was 17 and started doing a little bit of farming of himself, bought 6 acres into orchard with my grandpa, and then ended up managing it with, he was actually the foreman for the orchard he bought, and then eventually ended up buying some more and developing and growing, and now here we are.
And you said he does apples?
Cherries and pears.
Cherries and pears.
Yep.
I've heard people say pears are kind
Hit
of
or
a pain
miss.
in the butt.
Hit or miss. Yeah, they are. And they're kind of hard to grow. I think the biggest problem with the pear is people don't know how to eat them. And so if people could figure out how to cook them correctly or wait until they're actually ready, because you can't just grab a pear off a tree like you can an apple or a cherry and go, that's good, you know. So that's kind of, sometimes you'll get a nice pear, sometimes you won't. Sometimes the pear's blooms don't set and they're just really finicky. They're super susceptible to fire blight, so we're always constantly watching them for that. And yeah, they can be tough. The market's definitely a roller coaster.
Yeah.
So,
and that's mostly, you know, a market where you got to have A grade kind of fruit. Otherwise it goes to juice?
Yeah. Or peelers, like, find it in like a little Dole can, you know,
right.
And stuff like that. But that doesn't pay the bills. That's, you know, it's nice to do. It's a nice alternative for your culls, but hopefully 70% of that bin packed out into the fresh market, not 70% into the Dole snacks. So
if you do have a whole bunch of fresh pears, where do those end up? What do they do with them?
They stores, you know, Kroger's, Walmart's, Costco's, kind of everywhere. That's up to the marketing
once they're
team.
picked, how long can fresh, like, what's their shelf life at that point?
So I would say,
because they keep ripening, right? You're picking them before they're ripe.
Exactly.
And that gives you some time,
and
too.
that's why I kind of say that's where it's unlike any other fruit, because cherry, we pick it when it's ready, and you better be eating it within 10 days, right? Apple, same way. It's not like we're picking it and waiting for it to be ready. So the consumers need to understand that a pear isn't like the other fruits we grow around here. You need to give it time. But I would say we pick it with a week left of its sugars really dropping and it becoming soft and a good piece of fruit to eat. And then I would say it could probably last, you know, depending on if it was refrigerated or on your counter, you could probably have it for a week to 10 days and it still be a decent.
Yeah, usually if I'm at the store, I'm going to pick a pear that's almost ripe, but not quite.
Yep, exactly.
Because if you pick something that looks like it's turning from green to yellow, or, you know, depending on the variety, you're getting something that's, you know, already yellow and it's got kind of some dark marks on it.
Yep.
It's ripe. It's ready to eat there in the store. It looks so good.
Yep.
But by the time you get it home and it sits on the counter for a couple days and then you decide to eat it, it could be mush.
Could be mush. Exactly.
It's timing is huge with that, I would imagine.
Yeah. And it's like we're doing everything on our part, and that's why I don't put it entirely on the consumer, but they just need to understand that fruit's got a little window of where it's going to be the best. And some people will eat them and never go back. You know, they get a mushy one or they eat a hard one. They're like, no. Yeah. So.
But apples will keep, right?
Apples will keep, yes. And it depends on the variety, depends on a lot of things. I mean, it depends on when they were picked, when they were, what variety they are, et cetera, to how well they store, you know. And so, but several months, if stored correctly.
But pears won't. Pears are on that timeline that we were talking about. Right? Can you put them in cold storage?
You could put them in cold storage and make them last. That's a good question on how fast their sugars and everything comes into play when they're in cold storage. That's a question for my dad, but I think they probably are somewhere in between that apple, somewhere below the apple on storage. I don't think they store as well. No, you don't see guys storing pears around here. It's all apples. So, yeah.
Obviously, you think about, in what you're doing, you're thinking about the people that ultimately are consuming the food that you're growing.
Yep.
What's that like on a day-to-day basis when you're out in the field? Is that on your mind?
Always.
Daily?
Always. I mean, that's one of the best parts about my job is seeing something we worked so hard for leave the field and get put in the back of the truck, and just I hope that they enjoy that as much as I did growing it, and I hope that they you know, it can bring a smile to someone's face and be something good for them, you know. It always, and it just makes you sick too, and you have a problem. And it's just like, man, I wish I could have had, a better crop for my consumer, or because that's what we're doing. That's what we're here for. If we can't get our consumers on our side, then what are we?
Yeah.
So that's a big one.
What is it that you think that consumer doesn't see though, or doesn't know? Because people just go to the grocery store and get food. I just go to the grocery store and get food. Like I see the stuff that we grow locally, even because I'm in the farming community, but like stuff that you guys grow over here, I'm not around watching you guys grow it and harvest it. What do you think the missing pieces are that people don't see in this current system?
I mean, they need to take time to do their own research and I guess take whatever they're reading look into it a little more is what I would ask, because, my middle brother, he's from Seattle, or he works in Seattle. And a lot of his friends will come over here and go, holy smokes, we'll drive them around the farm and they're like, I had no idea. This is how complex. Like I hear you and your brother talk, dad comes into the kitchen, hey, we got this problem, we need to do this. And they're just like, holy smokes, this is what goes into it. And all the little fine print that most people don't read that it takes to get a good product to them. And I mean, there's many steps from not only us, but the carriers that take it from point A to B, the packing sheds, the people that handle that. I mean, there's many hands that handle that. And I think most people don't understand that. A lot of people do, but I think that us as an agriculture industry, we've done a poor job in the past of showing people what actually, we take it for granted. We know what goes into the day to day, but we don't do anything in particular to show the world what else it takes, what's going into this cherry getting to them, you know what I mean? Or sweet corn or whatever it may be, So.
What's your favorite crop of all of those? Of all the stuff that you do, if you could just pick one?
Oh, that's a vast question, because it could be what's the easiest. Corn. Yeah, I like corn because it's easy. But if you're looking at it from the money side, probably like cherries, because cherries are done, by July, and then we're done. We don't touch them. We're apples. We're constantly in there training the trees. It's a lot more labor intensive. It's, cherries by the 10th of July, we don't do anything but give them a couple shots of water and maybe a spray application, and that's it. And when we go to prune them, we prune with chainsaws, so you're taking out a whole limb instead of several branches, and you really have to look at an apple tree, and you cut too much, you're not going to have fruit that year, and where you cut, you're going to have an explosion of new limbs. So if you cut too much, then the next year you may be too heavy on fruit. And so it's a very fine game you have to play with an apple tree compared to a cherry tree. And so that's why I guess my answer would be that.
So much, everything that we bring up here is just more and more layers of complexity.
Yes. And that's why, I don't know it all by any means, but I am definitely a very open-minded person, and you got to listen to these older guys that have done it for years, because they can save you a lot of money and a lot of time,
They've been through the school of
hard knocks. You can't be a guy that says, I know what to do. It's like, no, you should just listen. There's a lot of truth to be had with what they say. You can learn a lot.
Such a balance with that, though, because I also hear from people, even on this podcast, that are like, yeah, there's the old way of doing things, and I want to, I'm whatever new generation taking on the farm. There's better ways to go about this on a variety of levels that people want to try this or that, or, whether it's the logistics of how they're doing it, the technology that they're using,
yep.
the actual cultural practices in the field. So where is that balance where it's like, listen to what the old timers say, because they have that school of hard knocks
yep.
experience, versus trying something new and breaking out of the mold?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think there's a medium there. I do. I think there's a lot of lessons that you can learn from the old timers, but there's also several new, there's a lot of it's a young man's world, and there's a lot of new ways of doing things. Dad's used to growing apples, at 5-foot spacings with no trellis and picking 60 bins to the acre. And now, this orchard right here that you see out to our right, it's at 2 feet at over 1,000 trees to the acre, and we're picking over 100 bins to the acre, and we have trellis wires out there, and it's way more complex. And so it's constantly changing. The answer lies somewhere in the middle of you can't be closed-minded on new things, but you also can't just take what you've been doing for years and put it on the back burner. So I guess that question lies somewhere in the middle.
So where did your dad learn what he knows? Because you said your grandpa wasn't in farming. So was your dad new to farming when he started?
Yeah. Get your ass kicked and not want to do that again.
Just
not
again, the hard knocks.
Yep. Prune it too hard and go, wow, I will never do that again. And that's what Dad, when he taught us how to prune, he goes, go do that row, and I just butchered it. I was like, Dad, this is the best tree ever. This is going to be the best row ever. And he's like there's going to be 10 cherries on that tree, and they're all going to be the size of softballs. Yeah, but there goes that. That's going to be a 2-year fix. But it was, I watched it, pruned it the next year, and that's kind of how I learned. But you can't teach someone how to prune a tree on a whiteboard. That's something you're going to have to go and do yourself and learn.
Well, and he gave you the freedom then to fail, it sounds like.
Oh, yeah.
To be able to make those mistakes and learn from
it. Absolutely. And you have to. I mean, I'm more of a visual person, but I mean, you can't. Every tree's different. Every rootstock's different. I mean, a cherry isn't just a cherry tree. There's several different rootstocks for apples and cherries, and that determines their vigor, and that determines everything. And so it's something you just have to keep in the back of your mind, So we're trying to get everything with the way labor's going, we're trying to get everything streamlined. So every planting, we're trying to use the same root, the same spacing, the same everything. So because it's really hard to teach our guys how to prune one block, and then they go into another block, and it's like what you just told them to do, they can't do over here. Yeah. It's like you'll cut out all our fruit in this block. So it's like it can be really hard. So our way of adapting to it as the owners of the farm is streamline it, get the same plantings, try to grow the same spacings and everything. So to try to ease the labor. Labor's everything right now for us.
Yeah, talk about that. I know there's a lot of pressure on that. A lot of people are saying it's really hard to find workers, especially harvest time, and rules and regulations are changing, all this stuff. What's the biggest struggle that you see in that realm, getting all the work done that needs to get done on a farm?
The struggle that I see is just finding bigger picture people that, I mean, you're always going to have guys the 9-to-5 guys on our farm that just, show up, leave, don't really care about anything other than the tree they're pruning. And so you got to have some guy manage that. And it's getting really hard. It's getting really, really hard. We can't find a whole lot of locals. We've almost 80% all H2 now, which is sad because I'd rather see the money go to my local economy. But because everybody knows a lot of the money just goes back to Mexico. But we can't get our output out of the local guys, nor can we find them. Those guys they'll just hop around all over but we're learning to find a really good guy and invest in him and give him some responsibility and hope that he can run a crew. Really. Yeah. That's what it's coming down to, but it's getting a lot harder, and it's a lot more expensive than it was even 3 or 4 years ago. A lot more expensive. Finding
good supervisors sounds like a pretty key thing too, just because with some of the controversy even around labor, or, when there's frustrations in a workplace and, people are saying, oh, this is this farm is bad or whatever it is, often that will come down to the supervisor and how well that person is managing their crew. often in farming, it's like the supervisors are the people who are good at their job, but that doesn't mean, if they're good at doing the hands-on work, and this is across the board with farmers, doesn't necessarily mean that they're good at managing people, which can be a totally different skill set.
You're exactly right. You're absolutely right. That's what you have to be such a well-rounded person. I mean, not only do you have to understand the work they're doing, and you have to have that kind of trust, and also you can't be a person that's going to micromanage either, because then your foreman's going to be mad and et cetera. You got to, that's why I said, give them the slack, but you're absolutely right. It is extremely hard to find.
Well, and then
if you're, and he's dealing with, people that have a very vast personalities out there. You got to treat everybody different, and you have to understand every single employee that you're working with. Maybe this guy, we have guys that don't do well with others, so we move them to their own area on the farm, and they're rock stars over there. And we got some guys that just like to stir, and it's like, okay, we can't have him there, so he's going over and he's going to be in the nursery, and it works. But if you don't understand that, and you put two alphas together, guess what? You're going to have a fight. You know what I mean? Not that we're having brawls out in the orchard, but you know what I mean? It's like, we know who works good with what, and what's their strong points. You have to understand your guys. Just as much as we have to understand how to grow the crop, we have to understand the guys that are helping us grow the crop.
And I think a lot of people, talking about what the consumer doesn't see, a lot of people don't understand that about farming, I think, because and rightly so, there's a lot of talk about that in, say, your more typical 9-to-5 office environment, and good leadership and good workplace environment and communication, and, fitting people with the right job that they like, and all that kind of stuff. Same thing applies out in the field, is what you're saying.
100%. Dad always jokes. He's like, I don't even know if I'm farming anymore. I'm just managing people. And that's more and more of what my brother's day to day looks like, is just managing people, having them in the correct spot. What do they enjoy? You can't take a guy and put him in a certain, he may hate it, and he just may, but okay, what do you like to enjoy? You like wiring stuff, you like putting panels and pump stations. Okay, well, we've got that, so let's put this guy here, and you got to look at everybody as a whole, and see what they enjoy, and put them there,
And with your supervisors, you got to, if you're supervising somebody who's supervising people,
when it gets tricky.
When you got to trust that person to treat those people well.
Yes.
Because I see that being often where things break down, where people say, I'm being mistreated in the workplace, and the farmer's saying, I've always wanted to make sure that you were taken care of as well as possible.
Yep.
But maybe their supervisor decided he didn't care.
Yep. No, and you're exactly right. And that's a huge part, is I want to focus more as I get into this career of mine, is investing in the people. Farmers invest, and I think you have to now. And I think you could get away with it 10 years ago. Like, there was no shortage of good labor. There was no shortage so it was like, okay, if this guy doesn't work, then we'll just, there's 5 other tractor drivers that asked for a job last week, where I think you need to invest in your people. And because, like I said, we invest in a lot of other inputs, fertilizer, seed, land, this, that. And it's like, okay, what about the people that are out there doing it? Okay. So, take care of them, and when you have a good guy, take care of him, because it can be hard. Someone leaves, and you got to bring in a new guy that is going to try to supervise, and that not only flusters everything else out, the crew, because they got a totally different manager coming in. They may have gotten used to this style for the last 2-3 years, and now you got this guy thinking he knows it all or whatever, and it's like, whoa, dude, you can't be coming in here like that. You're going to lose all respect with your crew, and if you do that, then I get to deal with it. When I have to deal with it, then now why should I have you if your crew doesn't like you?
Right.
So it's just bigger picture stuff. You got to be thinking of all this. And this is what every farmer's thinking of constantly.
You talk about needing to use the H2A program, the guest worker program, to get enough workers to get some of the jobs done. I would imagine that's primarily during harvest times, or?
Yeah, so we've had H2 guys for now 3 months. We normally got them right before cherry harvest. So we normally get them a few right now, and then majority in June, middle of June. And then we'd go cherries, pears, apples, and they'd leave like November 1st.
That's interesting.
So now we're almost all H2. So we try to, and that's where part of our diversification comes in. And that's why it's really kind of nice, because the hardest part of a farm is absolutely managing your labor. And if with our farm being so diversified, we have nursery stock and then our row crop side and cattle and this and that, is we can, Dad can call me and say, hey, I got 4 tractor drivers today, like that. I don't have any tractor driving, or vice versa. And it's like, okay, bring them on over here. It's like, you got to fill the workload with the labor you have. And so we bring them in for pruning now, and then we go through our nursery, then we dig, then we plant, and then we do all the trellises you see out here. And then we'll move from there straight into cherries. And we've planted our cherry varieties to where we have, we have sweethearts, skenas, bings, crystallinas, and those all come differently, so that we don't have 80 guys sitting waiting for a crop to ripen.
Right.
They're going from one variety to the next, and then pears, and then we have 3 varieties of pears, and then apples, and then keep them busy, because that's from a management standpoint, that's the easiest part, because everybody knows, like picking fruit, that's the easy part. It's the times of years like this where we got guys pulling trellis, guys putting drip in, guys trapping gophers, guys driving tractors. And it's like, it takes 3 hours in the morning just to get everybody set on autopilot, where if you can structure it that way, it can be a lot easier. So we're basing a lot of our rotations and decisions based off of our labor, especially with how hard it is to find and what we're paying now for it.
Yeah. And what you're paying for, that's an interesting part too, for a variety of reasons. One is the H2A program has been kind of controversial, right?
Yep.
And I think some people have the perception that it's like a kind of a cop out or a way to get cheap labor for your farm.
There's nothing cheap about it. There's nothing cheap about it.
Yeah, and that's where I think there's some misunderstanding on how the program actually works, right?
I'll tell you how the program works. So we have to pay for, when we went from, this is our 5th year H2, this is how we handled cherry harvest in the past. We'd put a list on our door with name, number, have you worked for us, how many of there are you, and where you're from. Mm-hmm. And we used to have 200, 300, 400 people show up at, before cherry season from all over, all walks of life. And it was great, hire them, pay them per bucket, pay them per hour of the minimum wage. Really easy. I mean, they were coming to us. Now we're going to
They're probably making more than minimum wage mostly, though. But you have to make sure that they don't make below that, right?
Yes.
Even at a piece rate?
Yep. And so now we've had to, since then, when we went H2, we've had to buy 7 people for people buses. That was an expense we didn't have before. Mm-hmm. We've had to build housing for them. Mm-hmm. Several $100,000 investment there. We have to almost have half of our secretary's job is to deal with all the paperwork that comes with this as well. So that's kind of eating up her. We're to the point where we almost need another secretary, because she's dealing with all the paperwork that comes with a federal program like that. Mm-hmm. So half of her salary is devoted to that. We have to pay for their way here.
Like
their flights.
Their flights, okay.
So everybody's been to Mexico, times it by 70, 80, 100, And then we have to drive them to and from the store once a week, provide them with a guaranteed 350 hours every 5 weeks, or we pay for that anyways.
So if there isn't enough work to do, you still have to pay.
Correct.
Up to that guarantee.
Correct. Correct. And if you take them from your farm and say, oh, well, my neighbor farm, he needs some help. Well, then he has to be bound to the same contract you signed for H2. So let's say his labor was $12 an hour. He got, guys locked in at that. That's good for him. But guess what? We're $14.75 over here. And if you want my H2 guys, you have to pay your whole farm this.
Yeah.
And so it's not a cheaper alternative.
Not just the H2A people.
$14.77 this year an hour. And that's what, when I said it earlier, that's what kind of frustrates me. These guys are superstars. I mean, they're great. We couldn't run our farm without them. And we all appreciate it. But I would rather, everybody knows that they get their check on Friday, 70% of it goes to Mexico. They just wire it down there. 30% stays with them. They're spending money here and there, but they're not paying for gas. They're not paying for transportation anywhere. They're not paying for their flight. And so none of this money's staying locally in the United States, really. That's where my problem is we could be paying American people. And so cheaper, no, not cheaper. Not cheaper when it comes to locals. I would say the only guarantee is the guys will show up every day. The guys will show up every day, because if not, then they go home. Where our local guys, they'll just go and leave for 25 cents just to Milt or McDougal or whoever's hiring down the road. And they'll be back in 3 years asking for a job because you may be paying the 30 cents higher. But those guys come and go, and that's super frustrating. So that's one thing that H2 has guaranteed us, is our labor is here when we need it.
So there is a lot of competition between farms of who's paying how much.
Yeah.
What puts a lid on that? Why don't you just pay more and more and more?
How bad you need a guy and what it's worth, what's he doing, and how bad do you need him? And then that decision is based on what's on the other end. Why do you need him? Okay, what's that going to cost you if you don't get a guy in place? Okay, well, if that outweighs this, hire him for what you think he's worth.
So the H2A program isn't necessarily what people think it is.
No. And like I said, do your own research or call guys that are doing it and understand it a little more before you have your opinions.
And you say you'd rather hire
I would rather hire locals. Yeah, I would.
But they're
that's just
not
the case.
Around?
No. They're not around. No. We cannot find enough labor right now to run our farm today with locals. Not even close. Like I said, we're 80-20 now. So 5 years ago, we were 100%, and then 80-20, we've worked our way completely backwards.
Wow.
And yeah, it's a lot more hurdles to jump through. It's, now we're managing, get done with a day of work and, the air conditioner in one of the H2 houses isn't working. Okay, well, now I'll put on my contractor hat and go and deal with that. And it's just like, we've never had that 5 years ago. We never had, on a Sunday, me, my dad, my brother, and two other guys have to drive, spend 3 hours of our Sunday to drive them to Walmart and stuff like that. So it's just a lot more on us. They took not only more money and more of an investment for us, but now more of our time.
What about state changes with labor and the rules and what you have to pay and overtime?
I think that
changing things?
It's changing things in a big way. And a lot of our guys aren't for it. If they would have known that this was going to be happening, they maybe would have spoken up and been a little louder. But a lot of our guys, when I mentioned to them, what do you think about 40 hours? And then, that sounds great. Well, how about if I told you you're only working 40 hours? Because that's how I'm going to handle this situation, is you're going to work your 40 hours. I may give you, if I really need to, which then again, you have to look at, okay, what's he doing? If he's disking a field, okay, well, that can wait, or I'll get another guy and work him 40 hours. But a lot of our guys are frustrated because they've put their car payments, a lot of our local guys are frustrated because they put their car payments, their rent and everything at 65 hours. I'm working for Karstetters at 65 hours.
Their budget, yeah.
And I've budgeted for this, and now you're going to cut me to that. I said, well, my hands are tied. This this is where we're at.
So why don't you just pay the overtime? Why don't you just pay the time and a half?
It goes back and forth. Now, if you can find the guys to run maybe a double crew, or find 3 guys to supplement the hours for everybody else, instead of working, let's say we took 5 guys at 60 hours and brought them to 40. If you can find 2 rock stars to fill the gaps, then that would certainly be the move, I think. But if you can't, like in some instances, we are paying the overtime a little bit. We try to, after that 40 hours, we're going to be really looking at what they're doing.
Is that a manageable cost? Is that sustainable for the farm?
No. I mean, it just seems like every day there's some other thing that passes legislation that just takes our bottom line out. That H2 program, that when we switched, I mean, we're well over $500,000 once you go into housing, what we're paying these guys, because we were paying our locals like $12 5 years ago, and now we're paying $14.70 for these H2 guys, and we've paid for their plane tickets, and we've bought these buses, and we've built these buildings. I mean, it took $500,000 off our bottom line like that, and it hasn't stopped. It's constant, and so it's really hard to just keep up with what's coming down the pipeline. You know more than anybody.
I've heard plenty about it for sure.
Yeah.
What's next? What do you think happens with all of this?
Sadly, and I don't want to see it, but you're pushing us to the point where we're just gonna go, automation. I would way rather, we've got guys that, watched me grow up, came to my soccer games, and I've grown up with their kids, and I love their families. I love everything that they're about. I love that they've helped us create this business of ours. But when the state, it's not necessarily them, which is another problem I have, but it's not necessarily them. It's the state saying, oh, this is what's better for them. It's like, well, how about you ask them? You know what I mean? But it's just going to push us to either really look at our operation and go, hey, we'll put the whole thing in corn, and I'll drive a combine, Dad'll drive a bank out, because it's not where it's getting to the point where where's our incentive as a business owner of a farm to want to deal with all of this day to day. It's like, when you take that much meat off the bone, then we're going to have to adapt. And I think adapting is cutting labor off your operation. Maybe you're not such a high labor operation, which is costing a lot of our good guys jobs, or automation. Apple picker is going to be, someone comes up to our farm and says, we got an apple picker that'll pick 100 bins an hour or 50 bins an hour. I'll take 5. And what's that do to my town? What's that do to my city? What's that do to my state? What's that do to all the families that depended on us? Not good. And so I don't want to do that, but they're kind of forcing us to look that way. And that's sad to me, because I know a lot of people are going to lose their jobs over it.
What about you? What's your future? You just want to keep doing this? This is I enjoy it. I've always wanted to farm. It's always caught my eye, and Dad did a pretty good job of setting the hook, I would say. And no, I'm here to stay. I'm here to adapt to what they're going to throw at me, and make the best of it, and hopefully can make the right decisions long enough to hand it off to another generation. So you want to have kids and have them continue it on? Yeah,
I would love that. And my brother actually just had a daughter 4 weeks ago, and so that's exciting, having something else to work for, other than myself and my family, my crew. So it's exciting. But I told him I'm going to get her a gavel instead of tractors to play with, because also farming is getting to the point where you better dot all of your I's and cross your T's and underline everything twice and circle it, because if you don't, someone will come and take you to the cleaners. And that's just...
You mean like getting sued?
Sued, lawsuits. I mean, in the day and age we live in now, I mean, you have to... I mean, we've fired guys and have had to hire them back because we didn't fire them for probable cause. And it's like, okay, well, how about he didn't show up to work and he didn't do what I asked? Well, that's not good enough anymore. So now my brothers and my dad and I, we have to create this paper trail and really just keep an eye out, because there's farms that have damn near gone under because they've been sued, and it's a changing world. And so it's just sad to see.
Does all of that extra, I mean, you early on in our conversation, you described all the like just normal pressure, weather, logistics, everything, all the cultural practice, everything you need to know to farm and figure out. But then on top of that, you're talking about particularly the labor stuff and legal pressures and things like that, economic pressures. Does all of this worry you for continuing on the farm?
Absolutely. Every day I get on the internet and read some other new article of what someone's trying to pass, and I get really frustrated and just go, that's not right. That's not what we're trying to do. That's not what we have ever intended for. That's not what farmers stand for. But that the people that are publishing those articles have so much backing and all the right resources in place to maybe talk people into believing that. And that's why I thank you for doing this. I do. And we need more guys like you getting the word out and explaining to people what really happens, and what that article really actually means behind closed door,
Right. What about for your long term? Does that make you think, gosh, if this keeps up, like maybe I shouldn't be farming for the rest of my life?
That's why I'm getting Kinsley's her name a gavel, because she'll be fighting for us in the courtroom as I'm out here growing the crops.
You think that's what it's going to take to be able to continue?
I think, accountants and attorneys right now run the world, and news media, bad news media. But I can be the best farmer in the world and grow the best crop, but if I can't cover myself in certain allegations and situations, and it can all be taken from me at any moment's notice. Whether I thought I was making the right decision or not, and you never know. You never know. So I don't see myself doing anything else. I don't. I enjoy farming, and I just hope we can get some of this stuff figured out. This is not looking good. It's not.
Well, I appreciate your honesty about it.
Yeah.
And just kind of laying it out there, both how everything works on the farm and all the pressures that you're facing, and how you're really feeling about the future. Like on one hand, you're optimistic and you're determined you're going to keep doing this, but at the same time, it sounds like you're really concerned too if it will be doable and sustainable.
It definitely crosses the mind. I mean, a lot of us will call each other, my friends and stuff, and be like, "Did you see this?" And we're like, "We can't have that." And like, for instance, that overtime back pay deal. It's like, oh, like that would for my personal farm, that would wreck me. I mean, there's that can't be a thing. That if that were to have happened in my operation, it would have been game over right there. You know what I mean? I haven't been farming long enough. I don't got reserves around to have something like that come to me. And so it's, like I said, it's just really frustrating. And a lot of the times it's like, who do you go to? Like, you can call your legislator 1,000 times a day, but and I know he's doing everything he can, but it seems like sometimes it's just uphill, both ways. Yeah. Just a losing battle in some cases. And that's another conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. No kidding. Well, thanks for having me to the farm and filling me in on what life is really like out here.
Absolutely. And you're welcome anytime. And like I said, I appreciate you doing this. It's really cool. And I've listened to most of your podcasts, and it's cool to get the point of views from other farmers too. You know, you can learn a lot from listening to these, and so I appreciate that.
Well, thank you very much.
Yep.
Normally this is the point where I'm supposed to be thanking you, but
hey.
I'll take it. Thanks so much.
Not a problem.
This is the Real Food, Real People podcast. These are the stories of the people who grow your food.